Hey JC Mac, let's take a look at the circular flow model and something called GDP. So the first thing I want us to look at is circular flow. Circular flow is a model that is basically going to show up on standardized tests and my tests all the time. What you're going to do in this market is you're going to have 4 stops on the train. So you're going to be looking at businesses and households and individuals. These are our 2 big players in the marketplace. So businesses are going to be businesses that do business. So this is your Target, your Walmart, a steel company, a railroad company, a car manufacturer. Households and individuals is you and your family. They will interact through the product market and the factor market. Okay? So the product market is where businesses sell things and people buy things. In the factor market, this is where people sell things and businesses buy them. So you see you've got 2 sets of arrows here. The set of arrows in the middle is going to represent resources. This is going to be things like land, labor, capital. This is going to be the stuff in this market. Then you can see the green arrows on the outside. Those are going to represent money. So money is going to flow around the outside of the circular flow model. So it's very important that you make sure that your arrows are always in the right direction. And you know exactly what you're looking at. So here's another look at this set of markets. And I think this is a good time to kind of talk about some of the vocabulary words that we're going to be using as we go through this conversation. So I want to start with households and individuals. Let's say that you go out after school today and mom says, hey, I need you to go and get a pair of shoes because we're going hiking this weekend. You are going to have, in this green money arrow, expenditures on goods and services. Those are the dollars that you're spending. So you're going to go into the product market, and that is going to come into businesses in the form of revenue. That's what businesses call it when they get money from their customers. From the business side, they are going to have goods and services that they have produced, they have offered to the product market. You will take those in as you consume goods and services. On the other market, we're looking at households and businesses in the factor market. So businesses have what we call costs of production. This is what it costs them to make the things that they're going to try to sell to you. Well, they need to get those factors of production, and they get that from households and individuals in the form of rent, wages, interests, and profit. Well, what can households offer to businesses? You got to think about those factors of production. Where is a business going to get an acre of land from? The person who owns it. Same thing with labor, capital, entrepreneurial ability. Those enter into businesses as what we call productive resources. If you're not familiar with these vocabulary words, I would take a second, pause this video, and write these down so that you've got them in your notes. So, circular flow diagrams come in many shapes and forms. This is the one that you'll see in your Krugman textbook. It's very, very similar. You'll see that they've just labeled it as money, 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 money going around the outside, and then goods and services and factors on the inside. So what I give you is a little bit more detailed. So a good way to understand how these markets work is to talk yourself through a story. So let's say that you've got a business like Target, and you have a household like me, and I decide after work today I need to go and get a gallon of milk. So I need to go into the product market. Well, I've got $5 and Target's got a gallon of milk. So I'm going to pay them the $5. They're going to hand me the gallon of milk, and everybody walks away happier. That is a product market interaction. On the other side, you've got the factor market. So in this case, you've got me. I'm a public school teacher. I need a second job. Where am I going to go work? Apparently the answer is Harley Davidson. Well, what I have to offer them is I have my labor. So I'm going to go do work for them. In exchange, they're going to hand me money. So they get the productive resource of my labor. I get the payment in form of a wage, and that's the factor market. So when you go to study for economics, one of the things that you're going to find is that when you Google can take you down a path to crazy. So these are just some of the circular flow diagrams that came up when I simply Google searched for circular flow model. They're all correct, but they're all kind of confusing if you don't quite know what you're looking for. So There's what we call an expanded circular flow diagram. This one throws in the government and foreign trade. What you really need to know is the basic model and then a little bit of what it looks like when the government shows up. Now, the second thing we need to talk about is something called GDP. GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product. And it's the answer to how much does America make in a year. So, what is GDP? GDP is the dollar value of all final goods and services produced within a country's borders in a given year. You're going to want to know that definition. It's going to be important to understand the difference between final goods and intermediate goods. Final goods are consumed by the ultimate user. These are the end products of production process. This is when you go to the store to buy a pair of shoes, those are the shoes that you buy. An intermediate good is a good that the business may have to purchase as part of producing the thing that you want to buy, but it's going to be used up in the production of final goods and services. So if I count both, I'm going to have a number that's a little bit off when it comes to GDP. So a good example of this is, let's say you go to buy a sandwich. Well, should Subway count the value of your sandwich in GDP? Or should we also count the value of the tomatoes that Subway had to buy from somebody, the lettuce that they had to buy from somebody? If I count all of those, I will have counted it when Subway purchased it and when you bought the sandwich at the very end. So we have to be very careful to only count final goods as we create a GDP number. The other thing that we have to be careful about are durable versus non-durable goods. Durable goods are things that last for a relatively long time, like a refrigerator. A non-durable good doesn't last very long, like food or a light bulb. If we're talking about durable goods, we have to be very careful about things that get resold. If you purchase a refrigerator and then sell it off, well, if you sold a used refrigerator, we already counted that refrigerator when it was new. So we want to make sure that we don't count the used good when it's time to create our number for the year in which you may have sold your used refrigerator. So there's two ways to calculate this that we're not going to really talk a lot about, but one that we are. So we're going to look at what we call the value of all goods and services produced. That's called the value-added approach. Value-added is a good approach, but we're not going to really focus on that because it's hard to come up with some numbers. The second one is what we call a total factor income or national income accounting method. To do that, you would take all the wages, all the rents, all the interest, and all the profits of everything that's out there in the world and try to come up with how much money did America make in a year. Well, that's really hard because not everybody reports the same stuff, not everybody talks about the same stuff, not everybody includes everything when they're really reporting to the IRS. So the easiest way to do this is what we call the aggregate spending model. That's what we're going to really focus on here. Because what we're looking at is how much money did you spend? Because I can calculate that from your receipts, from what business has taken, and that's a pretty easy way to come up with a number for us. So the components of GDP, no matter how I add them up, whether I do a value-added approach, whether I do a summative spending approach, whatever you want to do, they're all going to add up to the same number. So for our interest, we're going to focus on the one that's the easiest. The other thing you have to understand is that we can't put everything into this number. It would be really helpful if we could, but there's some stuff that we just can't put into this number. So the first thing is what we call non-market activities. This is goods and services that people make or do by themselves, like caring for kids, mowing lawns, cooking dinner. This is stuff that is really helpful, but it doesn't create a dollar value. Next thing is financial transactions. If we have transfer payments between the government and a person or between a business and a person, stock market transactions, those aren't going to count in GDP because they're not how much we made this year overall. The next thing is negative externalities. I can't graph unintended side effects. If my business is booming and life is really, really great, that's fantastic. But I have to make sure that I'm understanding that GDP is simply a number that shows me how much I made. It doesn't show me how much pollution is out there. It doesn't show me how tired people are. It doesn't show me the negative side effects of what's going on. The second to last one is the underground economy. If you've ever babysat for cash, mowed a lawn for cash, done anything for cash, and not reported it to the IRS, you are part of the black market. We can't count all of that because there's no place that it's been reported. The last part of here is quality of life. I can't count on this whether or not you had a holiday, whether or not you had a vacation. I can only really count what was created. So if we look at GDP numbers for things like Stalin's Russia has a really, really, really high GDP, but a really low quality of life and a lot of negative externalities that are happening. So we have to be careful to put these numbers into context. You may see a number sometimes called GNP. This is a number that's verging on extinction. It had a lot of meaning back when we were in the Cold War, because what we're looking here is the measure of the market value of all goods and services produced by Americans in 1 year. So instead of being a geographic discussion, this is a citizenship discussion. The American government really stopped using this in 1991, but it persisted popping up here and there. So I might mention it, but really what we're looking at here is citizenship versus geography. So a great way to look at that is ownership and location. So for GNP, gross national product, this would be a company that is producing things in the United States, like Ford. Okay, GDP, gross domestic product, is going to be a company that's producing things in the United States like Ford. Oh wait, that means you could be both GDP and GNP. So let's go back. GNP would be something like Kia. They're a car company. They are from Korea, but if they produce things in the United States, they would be part of Korea's GNP, but they'd be part of America's GDP. So you want to make sure that you understand where the company is from and where they're actually producing the good. Now, write this down in your notes. How are we going to calculate GDP? We're going to use an equation that says C plus I plus G plus X minus N. You absolutely must know what this is. So let's break it down for you. C is consumption. This is the spending by households on goods and services. This makes up about 2/3 of GDP spending. This is you and your family going to Target, going to Walmart, buying something at Cabela's. This is you spending money at Black Friday. It's when you spend money at your school lunch. I is for investment. This is not inventory, but this is when businesses are going to go out and they're going to say, I think the market looks pretty good. I'm going to add another production line. Or I think the market looks like it might be growing. I need to add another oven into my bakery so I can keep up with what people want. G is for government spending. This is all levels of government spending, from the national government, Washington, D.C., all the way down to the local government in the city of Ammon. So this is military, schools, highways, etc. The last chunk here is seen as X minus M, or sometimes XM. So this is net exports. You want to take the amount of things that we're exporting to other countries and subtract the things that we're importing from other countries. So if you look at the way that this relationship is set up, you'll see that it's very simple. If consumption goes up, GDP goes up. If government spending goes down, GDP goes down. The only hard part about this is when you get to the exports versus imports. We really, really like exports because that's where we're adding money to our economy. So if America is selling more things to, say, China or Britain or Uzbekistan, those exported goods and services are going to raise our GDP. Imports mean that we're giving money to other folks, and we don't like that very much. So if America is paying money to Brazil because we're buying something that we want from them, if we're paying money to Canada, if we're paying money to South Korea, all of those places we are giving money to other countries, and that's not good. That will lower our GDP and raise that country's GDP.